You don't need a confirmation because the void is behind you, not in front of you. You're not leaping into the unknown. You came from the unknown. And you realize that that's what I have always been. This is a free man. This is Samavesha, or in another way spoken in a tradition, Jivan Mukta, liberated whilst alive. So it seems like this discourse yesterday on vibration, introducing the doctrine of vibration, spanda. Everything is shimmering field of sound. Every form in its essence is sound condensed as matter. And beyond that, even more, not just the form, formless expressions are all also could be spoken in terms of waves, vibrations. We could, for example, say that this microphone, this chair, this table, cushion, rag, floor, walls, different degrees of expression of matter. But effectively speaking, it's still all sound. It's all sound. It's all a result of some form of condensed to such degree that it appears as a granite. Papaya is soft if it's ripe. Granite is hard. But in both cases, it's all the result of that, apparently. Just as if you zoom into the molecular structure of the granite and keep zooming, then that, at some point, what is acting and has the appearance of complete and utter solidity and hardness will begin to display different qualities. At some point, there would be a place where everything is just a vibrant field. It's very well known. A lot of researches were made in that. But it's not just about matter in the sense of how we experience objectivity in terms of objects out there. But it also can be spoken in terms of subtler sphere of experiences. Take something like as elusive as scent, the ability to perceive some scent, fragrance. It's also vibration. Everything is vibration. And then in the evening we have the discourse on suffering. So I think this was a kind of a good addition, good juxtaposition. So whereas the philosophy brings solace to the situation that we all experience here, one way or another, directly, by the fact that we are, whether we speak about it as being in the body, identifying with the body. The fact is, this is our experience. The world we live in is our experience, our everyday experience. We may pretend that we leave it all behind. Somehow we are not affected by that, but that is not true. So this is why it's important to always look into the possibility of what good can this knowledge provide. Can it equip us with the necessary insights so that our day-to-day life, our day-to-day interactions will no longer throw us completely off that what otherwise these philosophies aim to instill or provide. So then the question may be asked, why Kashmir Shaivism? Why not some other philosophy? Why not some other perspectives? Well, that's more kind of has that personal preference. Just that. Just a personal preference. Something that is at some point felt very intimately and deeply familiar in a sense of what the core of its message, the core of its, let's say, what the doctrines expound on, it just has great resonance. It's just simply not just making sense. A lot of other esoteric teachings I came across making sense. But here is something that simply felt also relevant to the time we live in, if you will. So it's not just personal preference, like personal preference can be in a sense of just like a hobby. You know, like there are a variety of different fields where we can be entertained by on the side of our main job, let's say. Whatever we do for a living, hence the term hobby is that, right? Hobby is not what we do for a living. If hobby becomes what we do for a living, it then becomes a profession. It's no longer a hobby. No? Hobby is that. Collecting something, you know, like being interested in horticulture, growing roses and not selling them. Just fascinated by different varieties of roses, you know. This is what we're talking about. See? So philosophy could also be that, a hobby. But here, what I share and speak to right now is that it could be something which simply give us a sense of a well-spent time when we have that luxury. Because in order to have a hobby, you need to be fit to have time to dedicate to it, no? And come on, parents here, right? Like, if you have to make a living, right? You can't have a hobby if the baby suddenly comes and tells you, do this, mommy, do this, daddy. Excuse me, I have 1 hour for my hobby time. Should come back later. No, that's not gonna cut. You know, so when is philosophy or interest in these things a hobby, and when it becomes a profession is a question. And what felt to me very strongly when I was introduced to the teachings of the Kashmir Shaiva philosophy, also known as Trika Shaivism, is that it answered a lot of lifetime quests, insights, personal revelations, in a kind of systematic way, if you see what I mean, how things just begin to feel as if really falling into that a coherent view of reality, rather than just being fascinated in some of its aspects. You know, like studies of metaphysics, one can just pick an area and it really will be fascinating, completely fascinating in its own right. No, here is the concrete and full picture of reality. And it deals with this kind of, I'll use this term, a fractal understanding, that every minute aspect of reality, no matter how small and seemingly insignificant, is always a reflection of the grand picture, is always here and now a confirmation of that grand metaphysical view this struck me as something extraordinary because I dealt with that even as an artist in the 90s, in my blooming youth, right, between mid-20s to mid-30s, to make sense to why am I doing that at all. You know, you can do things because you have to do this, because it brings you, it puts food on the table and pays rent, let's say. So that's already justified, got to do it. But if you do something creative, it's better carry some meaning. Why am I doing that? And every artist in every field at some point comes across this, having to reevaluate whether this is at all of any value what I do. It doesn't matter what people tell you, you know, how beautiful this and that. At some point you know that the only matter of, well, let me just maybe do a little adjustment here. Not entirely that healthy reflection coming from the sources that you trust, coming from those whose opinion, let's say, and view you value, is of great import. So let's not just dismiss it all. It's of great import, it's a great source of encouragement. But ultimately speaking, there is also this inner sense of knowing when you touched something and when a certain self, let's say, installed level of a degree of what you want to reach is always internal affair. And so the satisfaction here comes only when you are satisfied. See? When you feel satisfied. When one feels satisfied with what one does truly, then it brings tremendous joy. And of course, these insights, what is the purpose, is always there. For a young man that I was once, it was. So these questions were always there, sometimes like as that nagging bars, at other times more like in a gentler, reflective manner, so as to get equipped with that sense of, yes, what I'm doing is not just something, like in the big city of London, everyone is up to something, you have to really, really put your act together here. But if you studied something all your life, as I did since I was a kid, you want to know it has value, and the world is so vast, so much going on. It's so fast, everything changing, everything is totally, constantly in a flux. See, all this can knock you off your feet very quickly, unless you hop on let's say, carried by the wave. I've seen that, like how some artists are taken and carried by the wave of success, then, yeah, you just ride that wave. You don't have the time to ask. Maybe the impetus is no longer there because you're already in demand. Pictures you haven't painted are already sold. There are clients, there are people queuing. I'm just talking very privately, so don't just ignore it if this doesn't feel like part of spiritual discourse, that's what I'm saying. But certain insights were very important to me in terms of the feeling, the accompanying feeling when something went right. It's that feeling of harmony, that harmony is touched. There's something, there's this, you can't explain it. You see, and then it doesn't matter. See, it's just like one day in the studio something happened and there's a tremendous sense of satisfaction. Tremendous sense of satisfaction. Every interaction then becomes like icing on the cake. Everything, because you come from that place. And of course, and then I become a meditator. Then I became a meditator quite late, frankly, in my life by the age of 30. It took that long. By the age of 30, I was introduced to meditation, first in a sleep and then initiated into transcendental meditation a year after. So I began to make sense, or it became clearer when this area is touched, that something is touched. And in meditation it was very easy, very quickly. And then what is touched in meditation then carried into the waking state, into the interactions, affairs, certainly in, let's say, professional sense of making art. There was this great connection. So that same feeling of completeness, fullness, harmony, beauty. So this all came full, I would say, well, came forth when I was introduced to the philosophy of Kashmir Shaivism and began gobbling it all down, and because all these personal insights not only has been given that strong philosophical platform, but what struck me there and then is the value of that in a given moment in time. So just as I was always interested in philosophy since I was in my teens, like as far back as when I was 14 already, all that, all these existentialists, starting with Kierkegaard and Schopenhauer, and onwards to eventually to Nietzsche, right? All this was always there, always fascinating. But very rarely it, at the time, felt, or when I revisited it later on, acutely in response to the time that we live. And this is what I found fascinating, is in the doctrines of Kashmir Shaivism. Perhaps few key aspects, few key points. So one of these we have already mentioned, the life-affirming philosophy. So it's not life-denying. Some philosophies are profound, metaphysical expositions are profound. Like Advaita Vedanta is profound. It's extraordinary in every way. But it always came across, do not take this for granted, please, because if some of you would like to, or have been interested in it and studying it and delving into that, you have to make your own assumptions. It cannot be just taken for granted. But to me, personally, Advaita Vedanta felt as life-denying. Life-denying. Because even that whole thing in abiding in Brahman and everything that here is experienced at the human plane of reality, all this is considered to be simply as fleeting, to pass, with very little substance, with very little relevance, if any. Whereas in Kashmir Shaivism, there was a complete and utter reverse of that. And there are a lot of intricacies. So in addition for it to be life-affirming, there are certain key aspects that really strike me as being extraordinary in every way. One such aspect is the importance of sensory experiences. Whereas in a lot of philosophical schools that came from India, the first thing you carve, the first thing you meant to really deal with properly is the whole sensuality of being human. The whole aspect of having body with all its needs. It's the first thing you have to work at. Not that in the Tantra of Kashmir Shaivism, certain areas do not overlap, because there are a lot of discipline, a lot of necessity for discrimination and understanding of what is what. But as you progress on the path, there is a very clear areas that you encounter where not only rehabilitation of what it means to be in a body, but the whole thing it's all about it. The whole juice is here, is being in the body. The whole purpose of existence is being in the body. And this, to me, personally, made a full circle, as it were, closed, because prior to that, I've studied what was offered by my own teacher, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, within the TM movement. And I took these courses, and I've listened to a lot of tapes, and I've read a lot of stuff, starting with the science of creative intelligence, and all this, what later on was published. And I have to confess, it was on the intellectual level making a lot of sense. And it's highly elaborate in the sense of rich use of both Sanskrit and immediately Western terminology in English. But it all made true sense for me. In other words, all that knowledge was brought home to me when I somehow stumbled and became interested in what the key doctrines of Kashmir Shaivism operate with and known for. Suddenly all this came into a fuller, more complete, coherent, integral picture. Everything that I've ever intuited before, even as a kid, as I no doubt many of you have had touched that intuition, that level, that also was then reconfirmed and echoed through reading certain authors, having certain experiences. This direct communion with being is actually something which is always there. And it is by virtue of having simply this experience that is, by a matter of fact, being intimate and nothing else. In other words, the fact that I am experiencing something is a confirmation that all there is that, and I am the expression of that, I am that. Glimpses, insights, they became very clear because it was all articulated why that is, particularly with these profound expositions on the centrality of all experiences, which always rotates around the centrality of I-ness. Everything we experience on the account of being the experiencer. And it is accompanied always by that sense. Sense. What is that sense? That sense of I-amness. In Sanskrit is spoken of as aham bhava or bhavaham. Bhava is a feeling. It's a feeling. We don't need to go anywhere. We're always in the presence of that feeling of intimacy with what we are. Not intimacy with what we do, but first and foremost, it comes from that sense, that feeling. That's what the term stands here for, that term bhava. Feeling of I-amness. That feeling of I-amness, not I am man, or I am American, or I am artist, or I'm heterosexual, or I'm homosexual, or I'm captain in the military, or I'm this Navy officer, or I'm the fantastic Mr. what have you, or Miss. No, simply a sense of I amness is always there, always. You're interacting with someone, you're interacting from that place. You're left alone, you're by yourself. You are more acutely in touch with it. Whatever is happening, that's one thing is inescapable. Everything came and gone, but that sense was always there. That sense has nothing to do with growing up, smartening up. That sense was there when we were kids, when we were infants. That sense, nothing could be said about it at the time, because there's no language, there's no concepts, but that sense of I am is present there, present. And if you remember, just like casting eye back to how you have experienced everything, you will immediately feel that that is true. That sense has always not just accompanied you, but was actually prior to everything else. Prior to everything else. It doesn't matter whether you put that stool, climbed up and stood in front of the mirror in the bathroom, whether you were in a car ride with your parents to your school, on the bus, whether you took your first holiday by yourself, whether you were getting ready for your first date, whether you were confronted with the first sense of, now I have to act from a place of that independence. I'm now a grown-up person and I have to face the reality. Or just now, as each and every one of you sitting and hearing these words, there's this sense of I. And this sense of I never changed. It didn't come and it didn't go. It never left. It was always there. It is always there. And this was one of the profound confirmations of what was already always known. Because guess what? It is always known because there's only one knower. This is always known. We can speak about it as in variety of ways in terms of spiritual dynamics, which is utterly and entirely based on subject-object tension. We can speak about it like teacher-student dynamic. We can speak about it lover-beloved dynamic. We can speak about parent and kid dynamic. We can speak with so many dynamics. But that sense of I am is all there is and always been there. So knowing that what is a true realization, if you ask me what is one of the most commonly shared feature, let's put it this way, between that what transcends all cultures, transcends all different spiritual traditions, what would be that feature? When we speak about the reality of the situation when it comes to knowing oneself, know thyself, knowing oneself, what would that be? with the dawn of most profound realization, the first thing that comes is that I have always been that. Nothing new is added onto me. And that's why it's called recognition. You simply recognize who you are. And it has this vastness of I have always been that. It may be accompanied by some spiritual phantasmagoria. Maybe it will be accompanied, like for me, it certainly did. In meditations, this fast, movie back, frame by frame, kind of, like, it can be, it doesn't have to be. It can be something else. Or it can be just as a complete and utter backdrop, massive, that not facing the void, but the void is behind you. In a sense of, I have always been that. Not, aha, aha. The difference between aha. Aha, you're getting somewhere. Aha. It means it's a well-constructed HBO Netflix series. It's each episode gives you aha, so then you are hooked to the next one. So that's the difference between as many ahas that as there would be, like in Zen tradition, like he or she, mostly he, because before it was allowed for women to be taught, it's like stinking of enlightenment, that term, stinking of awakening, yes, very, very Zen, very Buddhist term. Stinking is so fresh, it stinks. It has double connotations, of course, because awakening is accompanied by outpouring of all the stuff, not just sweat, not just toxins. So it's like, how, like, I woke up, I know, I could feel it. So, and then they speak about teens of awakenings, 12, like, what's his name, the one who established the center in California before even Chogyam Trungpa came there. Chogyam came to the Colorado. No, he established it in California. It was very famous, canonic, iconic look. Not Suzuki Roshi. Thank you, dear. Someone been around the block now, talking about blocks. Suzuki Roshi was saying that, when I had my 12th awakening, and then I started to realize that I'm getting close. So, but the difference between this, so the enlightenment is not, has nothing to do with getting closer or another aha, another. It has this, I'm just giving this as tactile, if we were to make a movie, for example, right? As visceral sort of like analogy. When we are amidst of, let's say, or taken by a certain sense of a trepidation in the face of the unknown, we could say that the void is in front of us. The void is where we ought to leap. So the void is here. Right? I'm faced with the void, right? That speak about this way. But it feels as if the void is behind you. I'm just giving this as that visceral analogy of I have always been that. And that is the profound revelation. It's a recognition so powerful, so all-encompassing, so complete, that when many times I said that 1,000 most educated, savvy people in the job will tell you, you are not. You will simply yawn and carry on with whatever you're doing, because it doesn't make any like, you don't need the confirmation. You don't need the confirmation because the void is behind you, not in front of you. You're not leaping into the unknown. You came from the unknown. And you realize that that's what I have always been. This is a free man. This is Samavesha, or in another way spoken in a tradition, Jivan Mukta, liberated whilst alive. Totally and utterly liberated, on the account of simply recognizing that one has always been that and nothing else. Always. It's not something that was acquired, not something that was brought, not a result of this and that, and we begin to now. No, it's simply recognizing there and then that what I am, and that what I am, it's all there is. Not was or would be. It does not have that, because it completely and utterly transcends time and space. This, in Kashmir Shaivism, expounded with such crystal clarity, of course, gave tremendous degree of relief that this can be taught. This is actually it's like it's a philosophy. So we'll go back to drawings a little bit now, so it gives us that visual, let's say, support to anchor this understanding. And go back to what we did yesterday, maybe with some other pictorial analogy, so that it becomes clearer as well, and why the Kashmir Shaivism was chosen simply as an umbrella to relate what otherwise is very difficult to put into the language. So we spoke about the vibrations yesterday. We spoke about the doctrine of Spanda, which stands in parallel as the supreme exposition. We will talk about another doctrine, the doctrine of Krama, perhaps tomorrow or day after, which has its own status within the tradition, because it's known as the path of gradual transformation. Krama, translated as succession, because that's what it is. Spanda stands unique, because the doctrine of Spanda here, unlike or in comparison, let's say, to the doctrine of recognition, Pratya Bijna Hridaya, is not aimed at, let's say, that moment of instantaneous realization, recognition. But it has this, as we have pointed out, that Shakta-based more perspective. If one is more, let's say, the expression of Shiva, Spanda as a doctrine is an expression of Shakti. So it's tapping into the vibratory power of one's awareness is here considered to be the job, is to be aware of that vibratory power. And Spanda is that what is translated variously as slightest movement, and yet it's not movement in a sense of how we speak of it or how we relate to it in a common sense. It's like a quiver, a tremor, a throb. And it's the throb within awareness itself, that quiver. And it immediately, that quiver, it expresses itself as the utmost expansion and utmost contraction. So that quiver in itself contains everything. that quiver is still subtler than the formation of the tattvas or categories which will give rise to the fabric of space-time, which will give rise to the templates of all that what has some unique ways of being recognized for what it is. A scent of a rose versus scent of a lavender. A sound of striking a bell versus sound of a meowing cat. A surface of an cast iron or a Kashmir shawl. So, and you can continue the analogy. Everything that has some kind of appearance unique to its nature, unique to its category, all is encompassed already in the throb. So the realization of Spanda is a realization of Atma's fullness amidst of this worldly human experience. Because it contains and encompasses everything. So, you see, if we are to give it let's say a push and speculate, what's the difference between Pratyabhijna Hridayam or Spanda? From the point of view of Pratyabhijna Hridaya, that instantaneous recognition, that recognition in the heart, is all that is required. That's all there is. So in other words, it's seen as the aim, it's seen as the target. In Spanda, there is no such thing as getting it and living happily ever after. Do you see the difference? Sense the difference. Spanda is meant to be experienced continually amidst anything that is experienced. And there are examples are given. Let's mention these examples for the sake of clarity. The scriptures speak about some of these examples which give the visceral sense of what Spanda is. For example, when there is this sense when you get up from a rest and you are suddenly, you don't know what you're doing, whether you're coming or going. You are lost in that very moment, in that kind of complete state of void. You are in Spanda. In that very moment, you are in Spanda. But because lack of experience yet, you may feel, oh, I'm kind of maybe I need to check myself up. Maybe I need to go and do the check, maybe like an early onset of dementia, or I need to pull my act together. What am I supposed to do? Well, let me water the plants, maybe then I will remember, right? Because we're always going somewhere. I'm just trying to elucidate. We're always going somewhere. We always we always are trying to be productive. Let's face it, right? From here to there, I'm doing something. I cannot just waste my time. It costs money to be alive. I have to pay bills, for God's sake. What am I doing? Okay, I'm going to do it now. Okay, I've got more time. Then I'll have my tea break. I'll skip the tea break, I'll have my tea on my desk. Great. I'm killing two birds in one stone. I'm doing great job. This is my coffee. Okay. I can do we're always going somewhere after something. So this is already a propensity, you see? So already that what here spoken of, continuously, justifiably covered. So this example is given when one gets up An example literally given from a day nap, for example. And one finds oneself lost to what one is yet to do. One is neither coming nor going. In that moment, one is in spanda, tasting spanda. You see? When one knows now you know the difference. You savor that. You savor that there and then because it's deemed precious. Then the phenomenal, let's say, state of affairs will kick in and you will be given to the propensity of doing your next thing. Another example is when one is, let's say, amidst of the extraordinary display of the forces of nature, earthquake. That moment when the tremor, the earthquake starts, before you recognize, oh, this is earthquake, let's run for a cover, let's do this, or how, people who live in the earthquake zone areas, like those of you, some in LA, right? Other areas, know how it feels. The first feeling is straight in the heart. You feel it, something compact here in the heart. You are in spanda in that very moment. See? You are somewhere, walked across, orchard, some mangrove, and suddenly came to a spectacular, absolutely breathtaking view. And there's this, like literally every sense shut down because it's so overwhelming. You are in spanda. These are just examples in day-to-day lives that one can experience in display of forces of nature. It doesn't have to be just earthquake. It can be something else. Something where that sense of being arrested is experienced in the heart, because that's where spanda is experienced, in the heart. It can be experienced as void, or it can be experienced as that warm, compacted mass of consciousness. But one way or another, these experiences are aplenty, just as key points to locate how spanda is experienced, so that one can fall into spanda at will. At will, one can, with some due understanding and experience, one can find oneself amidst of spanda by simply experiencing any sense perception. Any sense perception, any one of the five, can lead you to the experience of spanda. More, of course, about it, because we need to unravel it very clearly. Kashmir Shaivism operates perhaps with the most sophisticated and intricate understanding of the working of the senses in terms of the whole conglomerate of this cascading awareness as it manifests itself as this world of forms and phenomena. That process of emission is for the sake of the culmination at the level of experience of the senses. So the experience of the senses, when something is basically here, known as the union of subject and object, is the culmination of that whole cascade. And when something is experienced, unity is reintroduced. Of course, it happens with a tremendous, unimaginable degree of velocity. But each time there is this experience, whatever that experience, tactile, sense through the sense of touch, sense of smell, sense of sight, hearing, whatever the experience we speak of here that belongs to the sensory perception. An act of union taking place, union of subject and object. And of course, all this is totally, entirely, and completely always taken for granted, except for few rare exceptions, where people in various different cultures become the exemplars of tapping into that. Particularly the folks who are, by virtue of the way they're wired, sensitivity, they tap into that. Poets, above all else. Poets. You know, that wasted kind of humanity. Like, what's the use of poetry? Just a waste of time, isn't it? Just like, you can't spread it on your bread, you know, the poetry. You're not wiser by the time you read something. You know, it's not like reading some story. It's not thrilling unless it's Edgar Allan Poe. You know? What a waste these people have in society. And that's why we have less and less poetry in our life, because we're finally getting our act together and becoming productive, you know? We need to get together before we leave the earth. We need to be all really prepared. We cannot take that same mess we've been here in onto the next planet. See? It's okay, the artificial intelligence will sort us out. They don't have poets. Don't need to. They play chess, but they don't have poets. So the poetry, the poets, they have that knack. They have that knack to rip the fabric of that Maya, to tear the fabric of the obvious